Adam Mares is in Mexico. So I got a much better co-host today. I got Ryan Blackburn. We're going to do this thing. It's Locked on Nuggets. Welcome to Locked on Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked on Network, your team every day. Thanks for making us a part of your life and making us your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. As I mentioned, I'm joined by none other than Ryan Blackburn, now of Mile High Sports. Ryan, congratulations on the new gig.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it. It's been a long time coming, and I'm just really excited. This is a big change for me. Was at Denver Stiffs for 6 years.
Yeah, that's longer than I held any job before I started writing at CBS. So I bounced around quite a bit. So you've already found more stability than I did when I was your age. We'll talk about Ryan's new gig and kind of I want to do just a brief segment at the end on Denver media and kind of like where it is right now in the scheme of things when it comes to the Nuggets and how that will potentially change with Tim Conley moving on. We're going to talk today about a number of things. I want to talk about what we kind of learned from the NBA Finals as it relates to the Nuggets in terms of who made the finals. We're going to talk about backup point guard, specifically Bones Hyland, and kind of like what we see as his long-term future potential and versus short-term. And then, as I mentioned, we'll talk about kind of the shorter-term stuff. I apologize for no shows earlier this week. Monday was Memorial Day, and then Tuesday was my birthday, and for my birthday, I got to go see my wife's favorite hockey team. That was my birthday gift. I got to go to my wife's favorite hockey team as I went to the game one of the Western Conference Finals, which, don't get me wrong, was awesome. But it was also a little bit like in The Simpsons. There's an episode of The Simpsons, which was a show that was relevant 30 years ago, where Homer gives Marge a bowling ball that says Homer on it for their anniversary. And that was what I've compared my wife taking me to an Avs game, quote, for my birthday, to watch her literally at one point say the words, "I will cut a bitch." That is what she said at this hockey game, because that's my extremely gender and race sensitive, very hyper inclusive, super supportive literature teacher wife turns into a raging maniac when she watches the Avalanche. But luckily, at least they won, so I didn't have to drive home with her like wanting to punch things. That was the upside of that. And then yesterday I was just swamped getting ready for the NBA Finals, but we're back on track now. So Ryan, let's start here. As I mentioned, the NBA Finals begin tonight with Game 1 versus between the Boston Celtics and Golden State Warriors. And I will posit this question to you very simply. These two teams are switch heavy. That's what they do, is they switch everything. Off ball in particular, Boston switched a significant amount more than any other team in the regular season and in the playoffs. Golden State, obviously famous for being one of the first teams to go small and switch everything. That's what these teams are. They are defined by two categorical traits, which is they use outside pressure to open up the interior and they switch everything. That's their core identities in terms of Boston shoots a ton of threes. Golden State actually doesn't anymore because teams are so primed to try and defend it, but that's what they use to open up the interior. So I'm going to ask you this. Can you make the NBA Finals if you are not able to switch all, and if you are not a team that shoots, or at least has the threat of shooting, a ton of threes?
It's a tough question, right? Like this is the new NBA. This is what everything is sort of evolving towards. It's been these 6-7 players that switch everything up and down. Everybody can shoot, pass, and dribble. Everybody can defend every position. And it's not surprising that the NBA has sort of trended like this. Golden State was the starter in all of this. And Draymond Green, as generational as he is, was the guy that really kicked this all off. So when you ask me that, can a team do it without doing this? I think the answer is probably yes. I think you have other skill sets that can really be helpful against most offenses when you're playing defense. Can you play it with a traditional center? I think that's a question, and I think that's a question that a lot of teams are running with right now, or at least when you've got guys like Al Horford and Robert Williams and Grant Williams for the Boston Celtics. Those guys are, I think the tallest one there is Horford, if I'm not mistaken, and he's like 6'9", and he has the mobility, even at 35, to move with everybody, or at least most people. Uh, a guy like Nikola Jokic doesn't really have that, so he's got to play a different way. Is it impossible for the Nuggets and teams like that to make the NBA Finals without playing that level of defense? No, of course it's not impossible, but I think it is harder.
So for me, a lot of it is we asked the question of like, can they do this? But I think maybe to me, like an interesting way of kind of putting it is teams are not doing it. Whether they can or not, they're not. Like there's a lot of context to Nikola and Embiid and like I wouldn't put Rudy Gobert, Karl Anthony Towns, right? As far as like the top big men in the league, those guys not making it. There's a lot of context that you have to get into, which obviously Nuggets fans know is like, no Jamal, no MPJ. With the Sixers, obviously it was, hey, Joel just wasn't himself because of the injury, and James Harden was a pile of vomit. And so if you like take those two things together, it makes it pretty hard for a big man to make the NBA Finals. What I do think, though, is when we look at it, we just haven't seen a team really dominated by that. And you can kind of counter with the idea of like Giannis and be like, well, Giannis is a big, but not really. He's still a wing. He still brings the ball to the floor. Now, Nikola brings the ball to the floor. So maybe that's like the comparison here. I think the Nuggets are inherently banking on breaking the mold. Like that is one thing that I do think has to be kind of taken as a prior, which is like, okay, you might be able to do this, but you are trying to do something that has not been the case. Because if we go beyond this season, we go back to last year, a big reason why the Bucks were able to reach the finals was not only injuries to Kevin Durant and James Harden, to James Harden and Kyrie Irving, but because of the Bucks switched a lot more. They didn't just play drop. They switched a lot more. Now they played drop like consistently, and the Celtics have too. Like the Celtics have actually played a ton of drop in the playoffs because they faced teams without, point guards. Like they faced teams that they could get away with that with because Drew Holiday just simply isn't good enough offensively based off of what he does defensively. The Nets scored a lot, but they just couldn't get any stops. And then in the conference finals, they faced whatever the hell that thing that was not Kyle Lowry was. So like that combination of things led them to be able to play these things. But still, Boston does switch a ton. The Bucks switched a ton. The Suns last year switched a ton. And their inability to switch this year, I think, was absolutely instrumental in their downfall to Dallas. They went bigger. Like they didn't replace Dario Saric, who was out the season with an ACL injury, who was their small ball 5 option. They went to JaVale McGee and Bismack Biyombo. You might remember JaVale McGee as the person that would have won the Nuggets the title had they played him more.
Damn straight.
and so there's like all these kind of factors, but we've seen consistently this trend. And so it seems like for the regular season, bigs are dominating. Joel and Nikola were 1 and 2 in MVP. Giannis was 3rd. All of a lot of the conversation is about like the new big men, but in the playoffs, for whatever reason, teams are just not able to handle the defensive assignments in particular. And I'm not sure how to get around that. Like, I'm not sure if you face a team where it's like, you just need to be able to switch, because Golden State, you just need to be able to switch. You just do.
Yeah.
And you're never going to be able to do that. Not that, again, what's crazy is like, I don't look at this and go like Nikola was the problem. Like, I think his first 2 games were terrible defensively, but they were in those last 3 games. But I wind up having a hard time getting around the idea, or getting around the fact, honestly, that these teams have been consistently one thing, and trying to be something different has not worked out.
I think you hit on it in a couple of prior episodes where you've been speaking a lot about drop coverage and how they haven't really played that aggressively. The Nuggets have during this last season. And one of the things that I think they did in prior years was as they had more personnel, as they had, I think, better point of attack defense, they were able to change up what they did. They were able to play less drop coverage and a little bit more aggressively on the ball. Sometimes they'd even switch with Nicola. And I think that Denver has to get back to doing that in the regular season, kind of like what the Milwaukee Bucks were doing. Despite the fact that Nicola is not Brook Lopez or Giannis Antetokounmpo, Jokic does his own thing defensively, and it is impactful in various ways. But I think the Nuggets as a whole kind of fell into this trap this past year, especially of, hey, we have to simplify this thing as much as possible because we've got a couple guys out. There is no way that we are going to be able to survive the season if we try to do a whole bunch of complex things. And honestly, it was like a house of cards for a lot of that. If Nicola went down, or if frankly Monte Morris went down, then they would have been screwed for much of the year, especially defensively. So I'm still okay with the idea of them not doing a whole bunch with Nicola in the action specifically going forward. I think that it's okay to still play him some drop, some at the level, some blitz, probably not switching a ton, but you do some of those things. But last year, the brief moment where we saw that kind of golden age of Nuggets basketball, 2020, 2021, was when they were switching 1 through 4. They were doing it. They were doing exactly what you were saying. Murray was switching on to Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Michael Porter was switching out onto the perimeter and not doing the worst job in the world. I do think that when you get this team back to, I think their actually realized version, that they can do some switching. They can do some aggressive coverages and try to simplify some things that way. But I don't think that we could have seen that this year.
Yeah. Let's get a break. We're going to come back, and I want to talk about Bones Hyland because I think Ryan's been very astute on watching Bones and seeing his potential. And I want to get his thoughts on kind of like we had this sensational first season for a 26th overall pick. I want to see what Ryan thinks about the future of Bones Hyland. We'll do that when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. But first, I want to tell you about BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. I'm on the Celtics in the series. I actually think that they're going to wind up winning. I like the Warriors first half. I like the over. I think that both teams are going to want to push pace. You can do those bets and all types of more, including my favorite prop, which is Andrew Wiggins overs at BetOnline. For all the latest sports development, news, and odds, including this year's basketball championship matchup, the NHL Hockey Conference Finals, Major League Baseball, and of course, all the latest fighting news from MMA and UFC to boxing. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Make sure your second listen, after you make us your first listen, is the Locked On NBA Big Board. A lot of draft stuff coming up. I am going to have to do a crash course because we're doing a Locked On mock draft. And so I have 5 picks. So I'm going to have to get on this pretty quickly. Make sure to go and check out the Locked On NBA Big Board with host Rafael Barlow from the Draft Junkies, along with Richard Stamen, Sam Ferris, and Leith Thulin, giving fans an in-depth look into the NBA draft, mock draft, player rankings, and of course the big boards. It's free and it's available wherever you get podcasts. Back here with Ryan Blackburn of Mile High Sports. I'm going to have to take some getting used to, sir. So I want to talk about Bones Hyland. All right. So he goes out and he has what's a pretty sensational first season in terms of volume. He has a number of games that are just jaw-dropping in terms of how amazing he was. He puts together what was a great rookie campaign. And now kind of the question, I think, going forward a lot is, all right, this new entrant into the Nuggets planned rotation is here. And Tim Connelly, Minnesota Timberwolves president of basketball operations, Tim Connelly, really believed in Hyland's ability to play on ball, to play point guard. And he struggled when he wasn't the primary point guard. He wouldn't struggle. He wasn't used to his most effectiveness. When Facu Campazzo was running point, it just wasn't a great fit. He needs to have the ball in his hands because of everything that he can create for Denver. That obviously creates a little bit of a with Monte Morris, in that Monte is very much a traditional point guard, brings the ball up, sets the floor, etc. I'll start here. Okay. In 3 years, what is Monte Morris, or what is Bones Hyland's? I'm sorry, in 3 years, what is Bones Hyland's role with the Denver Nuggets?
Wow, that's fascinating because if you ask me what quality of player he would be in 3 years, I think he's a starter quality player. I think he showed at least the benchmark that you would be looking for to say that a guy can reach higher levels. And as he gets more wiry, strong, and kind of fills out the frame a little bit, invokes some veteran moves in what he's doing, he seems like a guy that is going to just continue to get better as he gets smarter within the NBA and gets a little bit stronger. So I would say he's a starter from the maybe a playing time side, maybe the minutes side, but I don't know if he's going to start or close games for Denver. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the defense, if I didn't talk about what Denver's vision is and what they're going to need from that position. They need somebody who's a point of attack defender. Going with Jamal Murray, I think that Jamal can handle a lot of twos. I think that he can switch a little bit, and that's going to be something there. But they probably need somebody who's about 6'6", who's pretty good on ball, who can play off ball with the offense. And I don't know if that's Bones. I think it's going to be fascinating to see how that relationship evolves between him and Jamal. I would have loved to see it this year to see how they kind of riff off of each other. But if you're talking about Bones and Monte, I kind of think that Bones is going to have the ball in his hands a little bit more than Monte, especially a couple of years from now, even if Monte's still on the team.
Yeah, I think there's growing momentum towards a Monte Morris trade option in terms of being a potential that he's a guy that's moved. I think a lot of it, when you get to the point with where the Nuggets are, if you want to improve, you have to look at how you can. Like, you have to look at what you have to move or what you can make space for, what you can get. And Monte, I think, is one of the players that I think brings maybe the most value back, because reliable point guard, filled in ably as a starter this year. Backup point guard is a pretty valuable position. You see a lot of teams that aren't able to get organized a lot of times, and Monte's really good at doing that. You bring up the defense with Bones. I do think that's like a really interesting question of where he's going to get to, because with his frame, I don't know that he's ever going to be big in any real sense. Like, he's always going to be slight. He's always going to be kind of like that. Maybe not. Maybe, as he gets older, he widens considerably, as so many of us have as they get older. But like, I look at him and I really wonder about how he's going to be able to handle those types of situations. Like you bring up, it's a good point, where specifically with Jamal, like if Jamal, for any reason, just because the future is unknowable, if Jamal was moved for a Drew Holiday type, like a line A, top line elite defender, right?
Sure,
Which
sure.
I'm trying to imagine what level of player you would trade Jamal Murray for that could be that good defensively, and I can't think of one. Like, Marcus Smart literally won DPOY, and you would never trade Jamal Murray for Marcus Smart. Like, you would never do that, right? But maybe if you put him next to like a really elite level, but probably not. So that kind of brings the question of, do you think that Bones Hyland long term will be more valuable for Denver, or is Bones Hyland long term going to be more valuable as a trade piece? We're projecting wildly here. Like,
Yeah,
kids had one season. I'm just trying to get an idea of how, because you, especially as somebody that are keyed into the young guys, like, this is always our constant battle, is I like the veterans and you have traditionally liked the young guys.
yeah.
Which will change when Jamal becomes one of the old guys, by the way. That will change. But like, when we look at that comparison, I just kind of want to get your sense of how you think, like, do you think that the Nuggets may reach a point where trading Bones would be the best move?
Yeah, I absolutely think that that's a path. It would be. I think it would be irresponsible of me to just say, "Oh yeah, Bones is definitely a part of the core here for 10 years." That's because we just haven't seen what he looks like with two of their three most important players, and what that really means for Denver's lineups, what that really means for their structure. The offense between Jokic, Murray, and Porter when they were on the floor was incredible. And they didn't need a whole heck of a lot around them in order to be an elite offense. They don't necessarily need a lot from those other guys. And Bones, he gives you something. And I think he kind of projects to be a guy that can be kind of a defense breaker when he's the fourth option there, or if he's kind of the second or third option going against backups or something like that. Like he feels like a guy that can go for 25 to 30 points in a playoff game if they like down the road. And that's valuable. That's definitely something that you're looking for with this. Is it the most valuable? Would he be a better option to be a starter for a different team, especially kind of a rebuilding team that's looking for their guy? Because I think Bones has some of that. I wouldn't necessarily call him a like when I think about projecting draft picks, I don't necessarily think about it from okay, could this guy just be a starter in the league? Bones has star potential. It doesn't necessarily mean he will be a star. It doesn't necessarily mean if he's not a star, then he'll be a starter. But he has that mentality and he has that type of game where he could eventually be a primary star, like a primary ball handling star, which I think is nuts. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he will be that in Denver. And I actually think that he definitely won't be that in Denver. He probably would need his own situation, and he probably needs to not necessarily be like a Trey Young or a Darius Garland or somebody like that, but it's going to have to look something like that in order for him to realize his potential. And other teams might see that, other teams might value that, and that might be the window to getting Denver the defensive pieces they need. You're muted, Matt.
Thank you, sir. I'll ask you about finishing at the rim. Bones shot 59.6% at the rim this season. The league average is 65%. So he shot pretty well below league average, but still, if you're above 55%, I'm pretty satisfied with you. I just need you to not be. I need you to always make more shots at the rim than you miss. In the paint, though, he shot just 33%. Outside the restricted area in the paint, that's 33%. This is always kind of the question with a guy that's, literally called Bones. Do you think, can you see Bones getting to a spot where he's able to finish? Like, how does Bones get better at finishing? What's the key for it? Does he need to? Like, what are your thoughts on Bones' finishing potential?
Well, he definitely needs to. And I'd actually open up the mid range into that discussion too, because he wasn't a good mid range player either. He had that pretty slow release. He was pretty, like it wasn't natural for him to go up in the mid range and get those shots. At least, like he was more of a step back three kind of guy, a sidestep three kind of guy, somebody who's pulling from deep. You didn't see a whole bunch of dribbling into 16 footers or anything. And that's kind of something that if you're a star, you have to be able to do. Uh, Everybody or most everybody kind of struggles with that in between game when they start, when they get into the league, when they're trying to navigate things. And I don't think that Denver's system was very conducive for him being good with the spacing that they had with the second unit, with the not necessarily the best center, like pick and roll situation for most of the year. Um, I think that he will get better as he sees the floor a little bit better, as he sees defenses a little bit better, because he's going to have to be. Like you said, he's Bones. He's skin and bone. He's going to have to develop a floater to avoid contact. He's going to have to develop that in between game so that he can settle for a good shot and make it at a very good clip. Will he be a 60+% finisher at the rim? I don't know. I think he probably will be. He's pretty crafty around there. And as he gets more athletic and stronger and whatnot, then he probably will be. But it is a question, and I think it's probably the main thing inhibiting me from saying, oh yeah, he's definitely going to be a star.
Great stuff. Let's take a break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk a little bit about the Denver media landscape as Ryan takes a new job. We'll do that when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. But first, I want to tell you about Rock Auto. You got all these different makes and models, and it's hard to keep track of what it is that you need for your car or truck. You go into one of these big box stores, and you're going to have to deal with somebody at the counter fiddling around trying to find what's going on the computer. Oh, it's not working. Give me a minute. Okay, now it's working. Oh, we don't have the part. All this, it's a mess. Don't worry about that. Just go to rockauto.com. It's at home or in your pocket. You're going to save time and money when you use Rock Auto, and there's nothing more valuable than that combination of things. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years, and their prices are reliably low for every customer, so they don't play favorites between professionals and do-it-yourselfers. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution for your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in their How'd You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets with my friend Ryan Blackburn, who is also the new Nuggets writer at Mile High Sports. So Ryan, I first want to ask you, I know some of the particulars of why the move. I'll ask you this: what are you most excited about with taking this new position over at Mile High Sports?
I think it's going to be interesting. One of the things that at Denver Stiffs that I struggled with at times was I was very early into the managing of people stage of things, and at 22 years old, I kind of got into that, and Adam Pete elevated me at that point back in 2019, and I think I grew into that pretty well, but I was way over my head for a lot of it and trying to figure out the managing of people side of things. So I'm sort of excited about just being able to focus on the work, being able to focus on I want to write a story about X, and I can take my time with it. I don't necessarily have to get it out for a post count perspective. I have the opportunity to do a variety of things with that story. And then I'm going to continue doing podcasts and game reports and things like that. And I'm also excited about traveling. We've apparently got a travel budget, and I could potentially be going to some playoff games and things like that. So I'm really excited for the opportunity and think that just adds a little bit of flexibility to what I can do covering the team.
Awesome. That's really exciting to hear. Travel budget is that's a big get. Anytime you got a place that's got a travel budget, that's a big get. I have never had one. I've had to always scrap and claw to try and get there's willing to expense for various things, but never been okay, here's what you got to work with. So I want to talk a little bit about where the Nuggets media is kind of in the landscape, right? Because you have DNVR, which I would say that we're friendly to here for various reasons. And it's interesting. Mike Singer has the Post beat, and you've also got Vinny Benedetto from the Gazette there. So you have two beat writers. The Athletic does not have a beat writer, which everyone reminds them of about every 30 seconds. And rightfully so, it's an oversight. It's a problem. I know the folks over at The Athletic. I know why that situation has not been resolved. And I know that it probably will be, I would say, by next year. I would expect it to be resolved. So you will have effectively three beat writers at that point that are full-time just Nuggets beat writers from papers and or The Athletic. You have the beat writers, which obviously in my personal opinion, Wynn does an incredible job. Harrison is an amazing beat writer and will be in this industry for a long time. You have a bunch of podcasts. You have obviously the Altitude crew, and we'll see how that changes once that whole deal gets sorted out, whenever that deal gets sorted out. I think it's been interesting. DMAC from 1043 has been at every Nuggets press conference this season. He's been at every Avs press conference this season, which I don't know if people kind of realize, especially if they're not, if they're only tuned into their bubble. It's no. 1043 has had somebody there for each and every one. National media hasn't been as present in Denver this season, I think, because of the injuries. It was interesting that Nikola has this MVP season and there just wasn't. Now, some of that, but I will say, is by design, right? Is whether it's an agent for Joel or the team or whoever, someone was in concert with Chris Mannix coming to Philadelphia back in March and basically doing the MVP look at the MVP feature.
Right.
Um, Nicola like turns those down, and I want to be careful to say, like, I don't think that that's a good bad thing. It's okay for you. Like, I think it's okay that Joel Embiid wanted to win the award. It's
Yeah.
not better that Nicola didn't want to win it. It's different. It's like I think it's cool because I'm from the Midwest and we hate being attention being drawn on ourselves. So like Nicola's whole thing vibes with me, but that doesn't mean that it's like good or bad. I guess my key question for you when it comes to Nuggets media is you as part of the Denver Stiffs family, and I think DNVR plays into this a lot too, is the idea that like Denver doesn't get enough respect. Denver is overlooked. Do you think that that's really the case, given that Nicola's got a two-time MVP, or do you still wish there was more coverage of the Denver Nuggets? Because at this point, I think actually, like, I don't know that if you really look for it, fans need more than what they've been given.
It's a great question. And I honestly think that part of my personal success has been due to the fact that Denver hasn't been massively covered nationally. One of those reasons is people have turned to Denver Stiffs. People have turned to DNVR. People have turned to Locked On Nuggets, focused in on unique beat reporters in this entire process. Some part of it because they don't have that major national coverage, those guys that always get the scoops with the large outlets because they're connected and things like that. And I think that's definitely played a part of it. I also think that what's played a part of it is Denver's own kind of self-doing with this entire process, with the altitude situation, with Nikola Jokic's kind of aversion to major press tours and things like that. A part of this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, okay, you haven't been covered and respected. Part of that is you haven't put yourself out there.
Right.
And these are always going to be kind of Denver Nuggets tenets unless these things are solved. And I don't think Nikola Jokic is ever going to become a major press tour kind of guy. But if the Nuggets want to be more popular, then they better put themselves on TV. That's probably step one here. Step two is probably to continue connecting with some of the local reporters and making sure that everybody has these amazing stories that people can then read about. And Harrison's done a fantastic job. Mike has done a fantastic job. Vinny's done a fantastic job, as you said. Those stories really go a long way. I know that Mike, a lot of his stories get pushed by national media because they look at it, and especially the one recently about Nikola Jokic's MVP receipt and how that was given to him. That story was very popular, and a lot of people were like, "This is an incredible story here," and you don't necessarily get that unless like a guy like Mike, who's been given a little bit of more access there. He was able to kind of get into the nitty gritty of that. And I don't know if he would have had that opportunity if a major ESPN outlet was always around or a major athletic outlet was always around. And so it is very interesting. I think it's a unique thing to Denver. I don't know if it's necessarily a problem though, and I'm not complaining anymore. I've been off of the national respect thing because I think what Denver's done is self-evident.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's funny. There is kind of like this. I've had people ask, like, why did Denver reporters never break stories? That's been a thing. If you actually look around, it's not very common. You have to have a very special relationship between a reporter and the front office, and it goes beyond that to ownership. Like,
Right.
I will just tell you that like Adrian Wojnarowski will continue to break until Adrian Wojnarowski retires. Adrian Wojnarowski will continue to break every major Nugget story. Like that's what he will do. Mike's had a few. Mike's had like a few like pretty big wins, but Woj gets it first. And there's a number of reasons that goes into the dynamic of that. But
Sure.
that's just like a lot of it. Well, that makes it seem very complicated. It's a lot simpler. The front office but more specifically, ownership is very friendly with Woj, and that's just how it is. And Woj is the most like for as much work as Shams does, like Woj to me is still the most powerful. And so like that's the level that he operates on. I don't have Josh Kroenke's number. That's a thing I don't have. Nor have I asked for it. I could probably talk to him if I really put for it.
I don't think I could get it. That's with what I've said. I don't think I could get it.
What? Yeah, that's the other part of that. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and ask it. Look, they do not spend the money for Tim Conley. Now, I want to note Mark Stein has reported that it was not an equity stake. It was a bonus approximate with evaluation of the franchise. The money differential there is significant, but it shows that how much they think Tim Conley is worth. Like here's a serious question. Like because this is where I kind of get back to. Okay, the idea of you want more coverage, you want more attention, you want more respect. How are people supposed to take that approach when the Cronkies choose? Not the Cronkies. That's not fair. Stan chooses not to settle the Comcast dispute so that you get your team in front of the fans that want to watch and won't pay for Tim Conley, who built a championship contender. Like, to me, there is a relationship here between how much, like, I do go back and forth sometimes on how much, like, it's unfair. The Nuggets organization has done things the right way, and so they deserve to be treated with respect. Ownership has not always adhered to that respect. The very entity that owns them has not always granted them the respect that maybe they deserve.
And it's one of the reasons that you see all these guys leaving. It's like they've been shown that respect in various other places when a lot of other teams and coaches and ownership personnel are always looking at that like, hey, that team's doing really well. They're creating something that is really good. We should probably do something about that and maybe see what they're doing. And oh, you're not paying your guys. All right, well, what if we brought you in? And that conversation usually goes the same way every time, which is, okay, thank you for your service here. We are not going to pay you more, which is fine. That's their business model. But like you talked about, it is their own thing. And Stan clearly doesn't care. Like he clearly, it's not about caring for the franchise to win. It's more about caring how you're perceived. He clearly does not care about that perception because this has been 3 years with the altitude dispute. It's been a decade with the personnel that has left for greener pastures, especially greener pastures. And I'm not surprised that we're in this situation again with Denver having as many awesome candidates in their front office as they've had. Arturas was fantastic. Calvin Booth is going to be fantastic. We'll wait and see on the actual decisions over the course of these next 24 months. But I think that he will get another job somewhere else. That seems pretty clear.
Okay, let's go wrap it up with Ryan Blackburn of Mile High Sports. You can find Ryan and all his work on Twitter. It's linked in the episode description here. Thanks for joining me, Ryan. Good luck with the new gig. I'm sure I'll have you on very soon.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate you.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Make sure to rate, review, subscribe, give us those 5-star reviews. I'll be back tomorrow with a solo episode. We'll talk about, well, whatever's going on. I'm still waiting on Josh Kroenke to clear protocols so that we can have the press conference, which I am a little bit interested in because of some of the things I've heard. There's been a lot of make sure that you're at the presser. So we'll see how that breaks down. We'll talk about that when it happens. If not, I'll be back tomorrow and we'll talk about some other things with the Denver Nuggets because that's what we do here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us.